She asked to borrow my shampoo the first night she moved in. 2 weeks later, she was charging me rent. That's how it started, so quietly, so small, that I almost laughed when I tell people now. But back then, standing in my own kitchen with her handwriting on that expense list, I didn't laugh. I remember the way my hands trembled, clutching that sheet of paper, the smell of overbrewed coffee curling up in the air, and my husband sitting there, silent. My sister-in-law, Vanessa, had been through a rough divorce, or that's what I told myself when I said yes to her moving in. Just until you get back on your feet, I said. Those words would become the chain around my neck for months. When she arrived, she looked fragile, tired eyes, hair messy, suitcase barely zipped. I hugged her and said, "You're safe here," and I meant it. I always mean it when I say something. Our house wasn't big. A single story in the suburbs with creaky floors and a sunroom that caught morning light. I'd built that home with my husband, Eric. Every photo frame, every cushion on that couch, they all had a memory. But after Vanessa came, the air started to change. At first, it was the little things. Her perfume on my pillow, her shoes by the door, though she had a room of her own. Then, her voice, always a little too loud, a little too confident when she talked to Eric. "You've got to manage your finances better," she'd tell him, like she was the one keeping the house afloat. But the day she printed that house expense report, everything shifted. Before all this, before the whispers of betrayal, before I found out what she'd been hiding, life was ordinary. And I liked it that way. I worked from home as a freelance editor. I'd start my mornings early, before the world woke, before Eric's alarm buzzed. The smell of toast, the quiet tick of the kitchen clock, it grounded me. Eric would come in, kiss my cheek, pour coffee, and ask what I had planned. Simple, familiar. We weren't rich, but we were steady. Eric worked construction, came home smelling of dust and sun. We'd sit on the porch, share a beer, talk about nothing. When Vanessa called crying one Sunday evening, I didn't hesitate. She'd found out her husband, her high school sweetheart, had been cheating. She had nowhere else to go. Eric's eyes softened. "She can stay here, babe. Just for a while," I nodded. "Of course. Family is family." When she arrived that Friday, she hugged me tight, tears on her cheeks. "You're a lifesaver, seriously," she said. And I felt good. Proud even. She was polite at first. Helped with dishes. Offered to cook, though she mostly ordered takeout and left the boxes stacked on the counter. I overlooked it. Healing looks messy sometimes, I told myself. But the first clue came one morning, barely a week after she'd moved in. I came downstairs to find her sitting in my spot at the breakfast table, Eric's mug beside her, his favorite jam half empty. She looked up and smiled like she belonged there. "Oh, morning. I was just talking to Eric about the bills. You know, electricity, water. It's higher than it should be." I blinked. "Oh. Yeah, maybe the extra laundry?" She smiled, a little too tight. "Well, I can help track it. I'm good with spreadsheets." That was the first time I felt it, that shift in tone, that subtle claim of ownership. Like she wasn't a guest. Like she was evaluating how I ran my home. A week later, she printed something and left it on the kitchen counter. Shared household expenses. October. $200 for groceries. $80 for utilities. $150 for shared maintenance. At the bottom, she'd written, "My share, $0. Your share, $215 each." I stared at it for a long minute, my mind trying to make sense of what I was reading. When Eric came home, I showed him. "What is this?" He scratched his head, half embarrassed, half annoyed. She said she just wants to help organize things. "Don't take it personally." "Organize?" I said. "She's charging me rent in my own home." He sighed. "Just ignore it." "She's stressed," so I did. I ignored it. I told myself she was fragile. Divorce does strange things to people. Maybe this was her way of feeling in control. But I started noticing small changes around the house. My hand cream, the one I kept in the nightstand, gone. My favorite blanket, the soft gray one from our honeymoon trip, now in her room. And one afternoon, when I opened my laptop, my saved grocery list was deleted, replaced by a new one labeled House Budget, Vanessa's Plan. The air grew heavy. The house felt smaller. And Eric, well, he tried to stay neutral, though that only made things worse. Vanessa began to leave little notes. Please remember to lock the door. We're out of milk. Can you get some? It wasn't the words. It was the handwriting, neat, assertive, as if she were the homeowner leaving instructions for her tenant. I told myself, it's temporary, just until she finds her own place. But I didn't know then. She had no place to go. And worse, she had already started lying about why. 2 nights later, I heard her on the phone. The house was quiet, lights dim. I was walking to the kitchen when her voice stopped me. No, I told you, I'll get the money, she whispered harshly. I sold the dresser already. I'll figure out the rest. Just don't call here again. My breath caught. The only dresser in the house she could sell was in the guest room, the one we'd lent her. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. She hung up quickly, and when I peeked in, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, head in her hands. Everything okay? I asked softly. She looked up, startled, then forced a smile. Oh, yeah, just talking to my lawyer. Something inside me twisted. That was the first time I realized the woman I'd welcomed into my home was hiding something. And soon enough, that secret would unravel everything. The next morning, Vanessa was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs. She was humming, while frying eggs in my skillet. The same one I had bought from the farmer's market last spring, the one she'd once called too small for a family. Morning, she said, flipping the eggs with a flick of her wrist. I made breakfast. Hope you don't mind. The smell of butter and overcooked yolk filled the air. Eric was at the table, sipping his coffee like nothing was wrong. Smells. Good, I said, my voice tight. She beamed. Oh, and don't worry. I'll add the eggs and bread to the expense list later. The words hit me like a slow sting, polite, rehearsed, completely out of place in what used to be my home. After she left for her yoga class, or whatever it was she said she was doing, I went into the guest room. The dresser was gone. Completely. Just an empty patch of carpet where it had stood. I stood there, staring at that void in disbelief. She hadn't even asked. When Eric came home that evening, I told him. She sold the dresser, I said quietly. He looked confused. What? The oak dresser from the guest room. It's gone. She sold it, Eric, he frowned. Maybe she moved it. Did you ask her? I shouldn't have to ask her, I snapped. It's our house. He rubbed his temples. Babe, just calm down. She's been through hell. Maybe she needed the money. And she couldn't tell us? I said, feeling my throat tighten. What's next, the sofa? The TV? He didn't answer. Just looked tired, like the conversation itself was another bill he couldn't pay. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her voice on that phone call, low and desperate. I'll get the money. Who was she talking to? What money? 2 days later, I found out it was a Thursday. I was working in the sunroom when her phone rang on the counter. She was upstairs showering, and instinctively I glanced at the screen. Local pawn. Urgent. Something in my chest sank. I didn't pick it up, but I heard the voicemail ping seconds later. I shouldn't have listened, but I did. A man's voice, rough and impatient. Vanessa, it's been 3 weeks. You promised the payment. We can't keep holding your items. Either come by today or we'll sell them off. And don't bring your drama here again. My stomach turned cold. When she came downstairs, towel over her shoulder, I tried to keep my tone steady. Someone from a pawn shop called. She froze for a fraction of a second. Oh? Must be a wrong number. They mentioned your name, Vanessa. Her face hardened. You checked my phone? I didn't have to. It was right there. Well, she said sharply, maybe respect people's privacy next time. And she stormed out. Eric came home late that night, exhausted. She told me what happened, he said. You shouldn't have listened to her messages. I laughed bitterly. You're defending her now? He sighed. No one's defending anyone. I'm just saying, don't make it worse. Make it worse? I whispered. She's lying to us, Eric. She sold the furniture. She's getting calls from pawn shops. And she's charging me rent. He didn't look me in the eye. Maybe she just needs time. That was when I realized something painful. Eric wasn't neutral anymore. He was caught between loyalty and guilt. And guilt, when it's loud enough, can sound a lot like love. The breaking point came a week later. I came home from the grocery store, bags in hand, and heard laughter, Vanessa's laughter, coming from the living room. She was sitting on the couch with two women I didn't recognize, sipping wine, surrounded by open takeout boxes. My living room looked like a college dorm. Hey, you don't mind if I have some friends over, right? She said, glancing up like she already knew the answer didn't matter. We just needed a chill night. It's been stressful. My hands tightened around the grocery bags. I do mind, actually. You didn't ask. Her friends looked awkward, whispering to each other. But Vanessa only smirked. Wow, someone's uptight. Vanessa, I'm serious. Relax, she said, standing up. You've been so tense lately. Maybe you should take a yoga class instead of counting bills. Something in me snapped. I want you out, I said quietly. The room went silent. Even her friends stopped breathing. Her smile vanished. What did you just say? You heard me. This is my home. You've been lying, selling our furniture, making me feel like a guest in my own house, she scoffed. Oh, please, you think I want to live here? You think this place is paradise? I'm doing my best. Your best doesn't include stealing. Her jaw clenched. You have no idea what I'm dealing with. Then tell me, I said, stepping closer. Tell me why you're lying. For a moment, I saw something. A flicker of fear, guilt, maybe even shame. Then she exhaled, voice cracking. Fine, you want to know? I'm broke, okay? I lost everything in the divorce. The lawyer bills, the credit cards, it's all gone. And the worst part? I owe money to people I can't just ignore. Her eyes glistened, and for the first time, she looked small again. I didn't mean to sell the dresser, she whispered. I needed cash for the debt. If they don't get paid... Her voice broke off. Eric had come into the room, frozen in the doorway. What debt? He asked. She looked between us, panicked. It's nothing you'd understand. Try me, he said. Her shoulders sagged. Gambling, online betting. It started after Mark left. I just couldn't stop. I thought I could win it back. But the silence that followed felt like a heavy curtain falling. Eric sank into the couch, rubbing his face. I just stood there numb. So that was it, the secret. The thing she'd been hiding behind all her bossy lists and fake confidence. It wasn't about control. It was about shame, and now that shame was sitting right in our living room, messy, exposed, and bleeding into our lives. That night, I couldn't eat. Couldn't think straight. The image of her laughing with her friends, acting like nothing was wrong, burned in my mind. I knew one thing. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. If she wanted to treat me like a tenant, then it was time she learned who really owned the house. The next morning I woke before dawn. The house was quiet, that strange, heavy silence before sunrise where every thought feels louder. I sat in the kitchen, clutching my coffee mug, staring at the faint light creeping across the counter. My reflection in the window looked tired, older than I remembered. Eric came in, rubbing his eyes. You're up early, he murmured. I didn't look at him. Couldn't sleep, he hesitated. Listen. About last night. Don't, I said softly. Please, don't defend her again. I'm not, he said, sitting across from me. She's my sister. And I'm your wife, I said, meeting his eyes. So tell me, Eric, where do I fit in that equation? He didn't answer. For the first time in years, there was a wall between us that words couldn't climb. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning the house, maybe out of habit, maybe to keep from crying. I scrubbed the counters, vacuumed under the couch, rearranged the books. But when I reached the guest room door, I stopped. Vanessa was asleep, her door half open. Her clothes were everywhere, designer labels, shoes piled up like trophies. I glanced at her nightstand and saw something tucked under a candle, a folded sheet of paper. I shouldn't have looked. But I did. It was a pawn ticket. Amount, 1/8 to 950. Description, furniture, mirror set, jewelry. Due date, past due. A chill ran through me. The dresser wasn't the only thing she'd sold. That afternoon, I waited until Eric came home. He smelled like sawdust and rain, the scent I used to find comforting. I found this, I said, laying the pawn slip on the table. He picked it up, his expression unreadable. Where did you get this? Her room. Why were you— Don't, I said sharply. Don't you dare make this about me, he sighed. I'll talk to her. No, I said, surprising myself. I'll talk to her. She came downstairs an hour later, hair wet, wrapped in that robe she loved, the one she bought with my credit card by accident. Vanessa, I said quietly. She paused, wary. Yeah, I held up the paper. You sold the jewelry too? Her face went pale. You went through my things? Stop twisting this around, I said, my voice trembling. Those were Mom's pearls, weren't they? The ones Eric's mother gave you? Her silence was the answer. I felt something snap. Not anger exactly. Something deeper. A breaking of trust so complete it left an ache instead of rage. You need to leave, I said simply. Her mouth fell open. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. She laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, I said. But you can't stay here. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. You think Eric's going to let you do that? This is his family too. That's exactly why I'm doing it, I said. Because family doesn't destroy each other from the inside. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You've always hated me, I blinked. What? Ever since Eric married you, she spat. You act sweet, but you've been jealous. You can't stand that his family likes me, that he trusts me. That's not true, I said, my throat tightening. I wanted us to be close, she smirked. You wanted control. You wanted to be the only woman who mattered in this house. The words stung, not because they were true, but because part of her believed them. Before I could answer, Eric walked in. He froze at the sight of us. What's going on? He asked. She's kicking me out, Vanessa said, her tone dripping with wounded innocence. Because I made one mistake. One? I snapped. You've been lying, stealing, and manipulating us for weeks. Eric's eyes darted between us, torn. Vanessa, she doesn't care about you, Eric, she cut in. She just wants me gone so she can play perfect wife again. I felt tears sting my eyes. You don't get to rewrite this, Vanessa, but she was relentless. Ask her how she talks about you when you're not here. Ask her how she complains about your long hours, your spending, your— Enough, Eric roared. The silence that followed was like glass shattering. Vanessa blinked, stunned. Eric never raised his voice. Not like that. He turned to her, voice breaking. You lied to us. You took advantage of us. I don't even know who you are anymore. Her face crumpled. Eric, please, stop, he said quietly. Just stop. I'll help you find somewhere to stay. But you can't live here. She looked at him, then at me, disbelief turning to fury. You're choosing her over your own blood? He didn't answer. She grabbed her phone, stormed upstairs, and slammed the door so hard the frames on the wall shook. That night was long. I sat by the window, watching the rain smear the glass, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Eric didn't say much, just sat beside me, his hands clasped like he was praying. Finally, he whispered, "I never wanted it to come to this." "Me neither," I said. "But she left us no choice," he nodded slowly. "She'll hate me for this. She'll heal," I said softly. "But I won't, not if we keep living like this." And for the first time, he took my hand. Not out of obligation, not to calm me, but out of understanding. The next morning, she was gone. Her room was empty except for a few hangers and that faint trace of her perfume, the expensive one that lingered too long. On the counter, she'd left a note. "I hope you're happy. You won." V. I didn't feel like a winner. I just felt hollow. But in that hollowness, there was something new. Space. Space for quiet, for healing, for boundaries. And I realized something important. Peace doesn't always come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from saying, "No more," but peace, as I would soon learn, doesn't last forever. Not when family gossip travels faster than truth. Because within a week, Vanessa's story began to spread. And suddenly, I wasn't the woman who opened her home. I was the villain who threw out her husband's poor sister during her divorce. The public consequence was coming. And it would test everything I'd learned about dignity. You'd think once someone moves out, peace would come back like a tide rolling in, gentle, quiet, natural. But it didn't. It was the opposite. The silence she left behind wasn't peace. It was noise in disguise, whispers from family, pitying glances at church, subtle comments that dug under my skin like splinters. 2 days after Vanessa left, my mother-in-law called. I remember her tone, polite but sharp, the kind of politeness that cuts. "Sweetheart," she began, "I just got off the phone with Vanessa. She's staying with a friend for now." She sounded very hurt. I took a deep breath. "I'm sure she did." There was a pause. "She said you and Eric threw her out during the rain. She didn't mention the part where she sold our furniture and lied to us?" Silence again. Then a soft sigh. "Families go through hard times, dear. She's had a rough year. You might have handled it with more grace." Grace. That word stayed in my head long after the call ended. It tasted like accusation and perfume, something elegant that stung when it hit the skin. When Eric came home that evening, I told him about the call. He looked weary. "Mom's been messaging me too. She's worried about Vanessa." "Worried?" I said, laughing bitterly. "She's the one who made the mess. We picked up the pieces." "I know," he said quietly. "But they don't." That was the truth I didn't want to face. In our family, perception mattered more than reality. And Vanessa, clever, dramatic, charismatic Vanessa, knew exactly how to spin her story. A week later, at Eric's cousin's baby shower, it became obvious. The moment I walked in, the room went still for half a second. That invisible shift when you realize you've been talked about. His Aunt Linda, who usually hugged me tight, just gave a stiff nod. Someone whispered near the punch bowl. "I heard she made Vanessa pay rent while she was going through a divorce." "Really?" Another voice said, half gasping. "That's cold." I smiled through it all, fixing my hair, straightening my blouse, pretending I didn't hear. But inside, I was shaking. Eric saw it too. "Let's just stay for an hour," he whispered. I nodded, but that hour felt like a lifetime. Every conversation was a minefield. Every smile a test. When Vanessa's name came up, people spoke of her like a tragic heroine, the poor divorcee who'd been cast out by her heartless sister-in-law. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout the truth from the rooftops, how she lied, stole, manipulated, but something inside me, something calmer, stronger, told me not to. Because when people have already decided who the villain is, no amount of truth will change their story. That night, after we got home, Eric found me sitting in the dark living room. The air smelled like leftover candles and rain. "She's telling everyone I made her pay rent," I said, voice trembling. "Like I'm some kind of monster," he sighed. "I'll talk to them." "No," I said. "Don't. Let them believe what they want." He frowned. "You don't deserve that." "I know," I whispered. "But I don't need to prove myself to people who only see one side." He nodded slowly. "You've changed." "Maybe I had to," I said, and I meant it. Something in me was shifting, a quiet sort of strength I didn't recognize before. A few weeks later, the truth started unraveling on its own. It began with a phone call, not from family, but from one of Vanessa's friends, the same woman I'd seen in my living room that night with the wine bottles. "Hi," she said nervously. "I just wanted you to know. Vanessa's been asking people for money. She said she needed it to pay off what you owed her. But she mentioned gambling, too. I thought you should know." I thanked her, my stomach heavy with that mix of relief and sadness that comes when lies start to collapse under their own weight. I didn't tell Eric right away. I didn't need to, because a few days later, it reached him anyway. Through his brother, through his mother, through the inevitable web of gossip. By the time his mom called again, her tone had changed. "I just wanted to say," she said softly, "I might have misjudged the situation." "It's all right," I said. And I meant it. She hesitated. "Vanessa, she's in trouble again. Money trouble." I closed my eyes. "I hope she finds her way out." That was all I said. No bitterness. No satisfaction, because I'd learned something by then. Vindication doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's just silence. Peaceful, heavy silence. But the final test came a month later. Vanessa showed up at my door. It was raining. A thin drizzle that made everything look gray. She stood there, soaked, holding a small duffel bag. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Can I come in?" she asked finally, her voice small. I hesitated, then nodded. "Just for a minute." She stepped inside, looking around like a stranger revisiting a dream. "I wanted to say sorry," she said. Her eyes were puffy, her voice hoarse. "Not because I expect anything, just, I know I messed up." I said nothing. "I shouldn't have lied," she continued. "I shouldn't have taken from you. I thought if I pretended to have control, I wouldn't feel so broken." Her hands shook as she spoke, and for the first time, I saw not the manipulative woman who tried to dominate my home, but the scared, lonely person underneath. "I'm trying to get help," she whispered. "For the gambling, for everything." I nodded slowly. "That's good." She looked up, tears glistening. "You hate me, don't you?" I took a deep breath. "No, but I can't trust you." "Not yet," she nodded. "I understand." We stood there for a long moment, two women bound by family, divided by choices. When she left, she turned back at the door. "Thank you for letting me in." I just smiled faintly. "Take care of yourself." And when the door closed behind her, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. I didn't tell Eric about that visit until later that night. He listened quietly, then said, "Do you regret helping her?" I thought about it, the chaos, the pain, the sleepless nights. Then I shook my head. "No, I regret not setting boundaries sooner. Because kindness without boundaries isn't compassion. It's self-destruction dressed in good manners. The story might have ended there, quietly, with distance and dignity. But there was still one thing left, the healing, because it's one thing to kick someone out of your home. It's another to reclaim the peace they took with them. And that, I was about to learn, was the hardest part of all. The weeks after Vanessa's visit felt like a long exhale after months of holding my breath. I began to notice the little things again. The scent of coffee brewing in the morning. The creak of the floorboards when Eric walked across the hallway. The faint sound of the radio humming in the background. Normal life had returned. But not quite the same. It was quieter, heavier, wiser. I'd stopped expecting peace to feel perfect. Sometimes peace feels like emptiness, but it's still better than chaos. One afternoon, I was folding laundry when Eric came in, holding 2 mugs of tea. He'd started doing that lately. Small gestures that didn't need words. He handed me one and sat down. "Mom called again," he said softly. "Oh?" "She says Vanessa's been going to meetings." "Gambling recovery group," I nodded. "That's good." He looked at me carefully. "She wants to apologize to you properly." "In person," I smiled faintly. "She already did," he blinked. "She came by?" "About a month ago," I said. "I didn't tell you because it wasn't about us. It was about her finally facing herself." He was quiet for a while, then said, "You're stronger than me, you know that?" I laughed softly. "No, just tired." He smiled a little sadly. "You know, when she moved in, I thought we were doing the right thing." "We were," I said. "Helping family isn't wrong, but forgetting to protect yourself while doing it, that's where it gets dangerous." He nodded, staring into his mug. "Boundaries," he said quietly. "Boundaries," I echoed. That night, I took a long bath, something I hadn't done in months. The water was warm, scented with lavender oil. The sound of rain against the window was soft, steady, forgiving. As I leaned back, eyes closed, I thought about everything that had happened, the laughter that turned to tension, the kindness that became resentment, the trust that fractured, then taught me who I really was. For so long, I'd seen myself as the peacekeeper, the one who made things okay. But peace built on silence isn't peace. It's surrender. It took losing control of my home to learn that real kindness sometimes means saying no. A few weeks later, we were invited to Eric's family dinner, his mother's birthday. I hesitated before agreeing, but I could tell it mattered to him. When we arrived, the air was thick with that polite kind of tension families never quite hide. But to my surprise, Vanessa was there. She looked different, simpler. No designer clothes, no painted confidence. Just jeans, a cardigan, and a quiet expression that almost looked like humility. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment, it was like seeing a ghost. Not of who she was, but who she might have been all along if pain hadn't turned her hard. During dinner, she barely spoke. But as people started leaving, she approached me. "Hey," she said softly. "Can we talk?" I nodded. We stepped outside to the porch. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of lilacs. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "Not just for what you did, but for what you didn't do." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "You could have told everyone what I did," she said. "You could have ruined me." "But you didn't," I shrugged. "Wasn't my story to tell." Her voice wavered. "I'm sorry I made you the villain. You didn't deserve that." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I saw someone trying. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. "You're trying," I said. "That's what matters," she nodded, eyes glistening. "I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not sure I'm ready to give it," I admitted. "But I don't need to hold on to anger either." She smiled faintly. "That's enough for me." We stood there in silence for a while, not as enemies, not quite as family, but as 2 women learning how to let go. When she finally turned to leave, I felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because I'd stopped needing it to be. Life slowly moved forward. Eric and I began to talk again, really talk. About money, about boundaries, about what family actually means when the easy love runs out. We made new rules. No major decisions without both of us agreeing. No guests staying more than 2 weeks. And above all, no confusing pity for love. Because I realized something else. Guilt often wears the mask of compassion, but true compassion comes with clarity. I wasn't cold. I wasn't cruel. I was simply done bleeding for people who cut me with their chaos. Months passed. Seasons shifted. The house, once heavy with tension, began to feel like home again. Sometimes I'd walk into the guest room, now freshly painted, soft yellow instead of beige, and pause. Not to remember the pain, but to remind myself of what I'd learned there. That kindness without limits becomes currency for manipulation. That love to last must include the word enough. That strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply says, "No more drama under my roof." One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Eric came out to the porch with 2 glasses of iced tea. He handed me one and said, "You know, you were right." "About what?" "About protecting peace. About boundaries. I used to think keeping everyone happy was the goal. Now I think keeping ourselves whole is," I smiled. "Wholeness before harmony," he nodded. Exactly. We sat there, quiet, watching the sky change color, from gold to purple to soft gray. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to fix or explain anything. I just felt okay, because I finally understood something Aunt May herself might have said. Sometimes God doesn't send storms to punish us. He sends them to rearrange what we thought was safe, to show us which walls were too weak to stand. And when the storm clears, you don't rebuild the same house. You build a stronger one, with thicker walls, wiser hands, and a locked door that opens only to peace. But as Auntie May always says, every story has a heartbeat that keeps echoing long after the noise fades. And mine? Mine beats to a quiet truth. Family can love you deeply and still hurt you deeply. And learning where one ends and the other begins, that's the kind of wisdom that changes everything. You know, sometimes I still think about that day. The morning she moved in, suitcase in hand, eyes full of tears. And then I think about the day she left, that note on the counter. My kitchen finally quiet again. 2 snapshots of the same story. One full of hope, the other full of lessons. And if life has taught me anything, it's this. Helping someone doesn't mean letting them break your peace. It took me a long time to understand that boundaries aren't walls, they're fences with gates. Gates you can open for love and close for safety. When family crosses them, it hurts in a special kind of way, deep and slow. Because it's not just betrayal, it's grief for the version of them you thought you knew. But here's the thing nobody tells you. When you stop saving people who don't want to be saved, you don't lose your heart, you finally start protecting it. These days, when I walk through my house, I don't hear echoes of anger anymore. Just the soft hum of the fridge, the clink of Eric's coffee mug in the sink, the quiet rhythm of a home that's been reclaimed. Sometimes peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or applause. It just slips in quietly once the storm has passed, like sunlight through the blinds after a long night. And when it does, you realize you were never meant to keep everyone afloat. You were meant to learn when to swim away. So if you're listening to this, and you've got someone in your life, family or not, who keeps taking more than they give, ask yourself, what will it cost you to keep saving them? Because love without limits can drown even the strongest soul. And maybe, just maybe, the most loving thing you can do is finally say, no more. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own storm, share it with someone who needs to hear that boundaries are a kind of love too. And tell me in the comments, would you have let her back in?